the first two speakers. But before, I will give like a few minutes to Fabio Gouveia and Laura Pais, who are the two design students from our degrees that designed this year's visual communication campaign for the Ciclo de Conversas of this year. So Fabio and Laura, please.
Hi, I'm Laura and I'm here with Fabio, and we are students of Design and Multimedia in the University of Coimbra, and we are going to do a short presentation about the visual identity that we have made for Ciclo de Conversas Design and Multimedia 2021. And this project was created initially within Project 1, Identity on Web Curricular Unit, with the teachers Artur Rebelo, Tiago Martins and Jorge Cardoso. And our idea for this project started by seeing coffee typography in Nuno's Coelho class, actually. And also we knew that we wanted to have the experience of making a typeface from scratch. And with the inspiration of coffee typography, we've done a squared bold monospace typeface named Zacia.
Then we've made a logo that adapts to every format. So we look at the initials of the event, CCDM, and the two C's of the initials became our frame and container for all of the information that we need to communicate. The remaining letters of the initials, D and M, end up going inside the frame, and when we stretch the logo to fit information, they go together as one. Here are some examples of the logo being used. We can use it to fit any size, banners, posters, websites, and everything we need. Now I'm going to show the website. The website is the most challenging part of this project because it needs to expand and fit user screen, but in the end, it was very grateful seeing it work nicely. The project ended up here by an invitation of the organization committee. We are very thankful for their help and for the invitation for our first real project. I hope you enjoyed the last session and this one too. Bye.
Okay, you done? Thank you, Laura and Fabio. Congratulations on the work done. So I'm gonna briefly present the two guest speakers today. So Ece Canlı is a design researcher, an artist and a musician, born in Turkey, but currently based in Porto, in Portugal. And also Diogo Tudela, that is an independent researcher and a programmer, also based in Porto. I won't say anything else about them. I will let them present themselves. But before giving the floor to Ece, which will be the first speaker, I want to say that after the two presentations, there will be a Q&A session. You might be watching from home, you can post questions like written on the chat room in the YouTube page, and then I'll be the moderator and I'll post the questions to the guest speakers. I forgot to present myself. My name is Nuno Coelho and I'll be the moderator at the Q&A sessions. Thank you, Ece, Diogo, once again. I'll now, Ece, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I'm Ece, and thank you for being here today, and thank you, Nuno and the faculty, for inviting me. I think, yeah, it's interesting to be here today to share the session with Diogo because, I mean, we worked together before in several projects, but I think our works are quite different from each other in terms of medium as well and driving forces. But I'm sure there's going to be an interesting conversation and some meeting points. So yeah, today I'm supposed to talk about my work. Maybe I share my screen already. Yeah, my big name. So yeah. So yeah, I'm supposed to talk about my work. So I will give an overview and a bit of context about what kind of things I did before. So I will go a little bit back, and I will also talk about what I'm doing right now. But of course, I mean, there's no time to include everything, like some of the reading, some of the some of the videos and audios. So please feel free to contact me afterwards also, if you're interested in reading and watching me further. So yeah, as Nuno said, I'm a design researcher, artist and musician. I call myself design researcher because I'm not practicing design in a professional sense for some time, but I'm investigating it. And actually to talk about my work in general, because of this multidisciplinary way of working, it's always a challenge. It's always challenging for me to talk about my work, because I always feel that I have two parallel lives, artistic and academic. I mean, mostly in artistic research context, you know, people work and research at the same time, but for me they're quite, they're running in parallel to each other. So one is design research, which is focused on mostly body politics, materiality, gender and sexuality, decoloniality. I will explain a little bit more. And the other is music and vocal practices and performance, which is focused on extended vocal techniques, and I will explain also what it is, counterfactual narrations. Of course, on the other hand, although these fields, they don't sometimes even for me look connected, but of course they have a common ground. Actually, a couple of years ago, I found this incredible text by indigenous feminist scholars Eve Tuck and Chris Lee, called A Glossary of Haunting. So haunting like ghosts. So this glossary, it's this haunting, this concept that they used in terms of in the context of slavery, colonialism, and art, because it's the glossary. It's an academic text, but written artistically, written really beautifully. It talks about actually they critique the reconciliation of wrongdoings and how like they adopt haunting as a revenge, like as a refusal kind of to condone violence. So I feel that my work in both music and academic work, maybe the common ground might be this kind of haunting. So it's like a strategy as a resisting and also counteracting against, let's say, forms of hegemonic power, or like denouncing, not only denouncing the oppressions and inequalities, namely, but also, kind of counteract them. And also, of course, it's not only related to gender and sexuality, although it's my starting point. It can be also about, you know, all kinds of segregations and stratifications in society, like class, gentrification, territorial and epistemic dominance, and so on. So of course these terms are a bit charged. I don't want to tire them by using them so much, but at the same time, I use right now, I think more and more people are familiar with these terms. So sometimes it's important to name the name, you know. It's important to say class segregation than, you know, economical issues. Anyway, so this, even though I didn't call by then as haunting, or I was not so much, I think, conscious. So, yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. Sorry. I was saying, I will go back a little bit. So although I didn't call it haunting by then, I started using this as a method, I think, as early as in my undergraduate education in Turkey, while I was studying product design. So it's my background. As soon as I think I entered the program, I understood, or I kind of started questioning what was the meaning of industrialized product design in a way. But instead of quitting that, I also questioned, okay, if I have the skills, what kind of things I can do in that, like how actually design can be design, itself as a practice. It doesn't have to be product design per se, but other areas. an act of making, how can it be actually used as a tool for especially political activism. And at the same time, in those years, I started being engaged in feminist activism, and I was like more aware. So it was important for me to kind of use my own skills that I was learning at the time in gender activism. But it became more present when I went to Sweden to do my master's. I did my master's in art and design, interdisciplinary studies. And at the same time, I was working with a feminist activist group in Turkey, whose agenda was to pass a law for sexual harassment in universities in particular. So it was like many years before Me Too movement. So it was still like, there were a lot of issues to talk and, still no, to discuss about these issues. So I was working with this activist group. I was the only designer. So my contribution was like, making visuals and banners, videos, artifacts for public demonstrations, like basics. But also they challenged me to do a more attention grabbing and unorthodox kind of public intervention on the issue. So I did this project then. It was a 2 years research and practice-based research project called Academy of Silence, Silence of Academy, Design as a Tool, Design as a Political Practice. So I with them, with this feminist activist group, I organized this workshop. So the idea was making a dictionary as a symbolic object also for academia, no? So in this workshop, sorry, because I cannot handle two things if it's in the center, but I will manage. Then we made this anonymous book in which we defined all the terms like sexist and phobic, biased words one by one, and we redefined them. And in an open session like this, it was like, quite intense, a couple of sessions. And then we also included in the dictionary the photos of crime scenes, like publicly uttered hate speeches, and so on. So it was like, and also personal experiences. So this dictionary then, it was a kind of, again, haunting the harassers or people who kind of ignore the issue. So we use this as a public intervention object, and we put it in the libraries, canteens, and other places in the university and outside of the universities. So it became really like a point of discussion, especially among young men. It stirred a lot of discussion. So it was important. It's as a like simple materialized design object, not like super innovative kind of groundbreaking object, but like very simply we managed to kind of steer the discussions and to drew attention to the issue. Then when I got back to Sweden to display this work for the final exhibition, I had to. So then I encountered the problem of translation, more contextually than linguistically. How to kind of transpose or take one context to the other context without actually losing the ground, losing the meaning. So I decided not to translate the book then, but then make it kind of transliteration, visually and physically. So I put the context in another medium. I kind of transliterated the book to another medium, which was this black box in the exhibition area. So in this installation in the black box, I made a video, the performance with the performance artist I was working with by then, also a feminist activist. So she drew on her imagery experiences of sexual violence in the university that I was studying, and with using many like different questions and drawing her own, mapping her own experiences. So this was the video, and the rest of the room had this book nailed that and like all these issues and words in the dictionary around it. and also we made a see-through window with the same with kind of this like bad translated again transliterated experiences of people. So where the personal narratives of harassment in universities became like translucent and yet present in the university itself. So after this master's degree, by the way, I think, yeah, this is, I mentioned it was also painted by chalk. This is a kind of also referring to the kind of the academic, has academic connotations. So after the master, after this work, I continued expanding my understanding of design and gender, and actually more and more their intricate and interdependent relationship. So after a while, I got to the point that my previous question of whether design can be used as a political tool or not was not really relevant, because design was not a tool. design is a system, right? Design is not like something I can use it for a political purpose, you know, like one off, and then just like not caring or keeping on other stuff. But it's like design is happening, you know, it's like it's part of the politics that are enacted already. It's a materialization of the issues that that we talk about. So while I expanded my definition of the politics of design and materiality, and again, materiality or material reconfigurations, I call them everything from spaces to size, technologies. I delved into the question of also the construction of identity and body politics further. So it's not about, you know, women are harassed, or like it's not like one unidirectional kind of oppression, but like it's like so complex. They're so complex identities and other power relations, other power dynamics in that, like this, like the issue of gender and sexuality, only there are like bits and axes of bigger, you know, matrix of power, of course, including other socially constructed identities, like, you know, racial, ethnic, class, other kind of identity formations. So I don't want to bother this because it's not a lecture, theoretical or you know, so deep lecture. So I'm just like kind of giving the context, how I arrived to today, my own research right now. So so I started digging this genealogy of privileges and oppressions, and it led me to examine actually early material constructions of these identities and these power relations. And I was like kind of tracing this historical construction of you know, like what kind of segregated spaces that happened before, and what is happening right now, and what is the relationship between them, and what kind of colonial imperial ideologies that are, you know, still enacted in different places, and how also within oppressive context there are still you know, there's always an oppressor of the oppressed, and that can be also oppressor. It's like this vicious circle. So I was very interested in kind of unfolding them, not like looking them as a closed thing, and I'm still doing it, I guess. It's never ending unfolding, but yeah, with these concerns, actually I entered to the colonial thought, intersectionality, queer theory, like merging all these totally outside design theories. Kind of I was trying to bring them to the design context, because outside the design field, in material culture studies, architecture and arts, you know, like these things have been discussed, but when in our practice really doing, it's still very, it kind of yeah, it still doesn't consider this kind of complex power relations. So anyway, I decided to do my doctoral thesis with these concerns, which is called Queering Design, Material Reconfigurations of Body Politics. And I focused particularly on, which is called coloniality of gender. So how gender actually is is not one, again, one, it's just a pillar, you know, gender and sexuality, control of gender and sexuality is only one pillar of other prerequisite construction of ongoing colonial ideologies like control of authority, you know, political administrations, borders, nation states, control of economy, consumption, labor exploitation, control of subjectivity, how we know, you know, epistemologies like our knowledge and ethnocentric, most of the time, worldviews and so on. So this kind of these pillars and these constructions was kind of the center of my my PhD, my doctoral work. So my argument was these systems have been always sustained, reproduced, and reified, materialized by design. So I give a lot of examples from history, and then yeah, in the eventually it's like theoretical, practical, but also it was methodological kind of work. Yeah, and its aim was it had three aims, three objectives. Bridging, it was meant to bridge queer studies and the colonial thought with design theory practice, and it wanted to offer an open-ended queer methodological framework also for future designers and practitioners. And third, it was this practical part I was talking about, and I will a bit deconstructing, or if not deconstructing, undesigning or interrupting, let's say, the already existing oppressive or biased, let's say, design things. So in other words, in this practical part, I wanted to demonstrate practical implications of all these theoretical arguments. So I organized a set of hands-on workshops as tryouts, not like workshops to, you know, to create new things, but actually these workshops, and just like in my master's thesis, and I'm still working like that. So in my research, I always work with non-designers, non-practitioners, who are directly, especially activists, but not necessarily, but who are directly afflicted by these material practices, and they don't actually they don't practice these things, but they're afflicted. So I'm interested how non-designers, non-trained people can undo and deconstruct this kind of, you know, these objects and designs and systems. So with this last objective, I organized very briefly 3 workshops on the concept of queering and unmaking and design things, and 3 different themes and mediums in 3 different geographical contexts. So the first one, I will just like very briefly talk about them, not like going too deep. The first was sartorial configurations, and the second, sartorial meaning clothings, you know, garments. And the second was discursive reconfigurations, which is about the language and discourses. And the third was about spaces. So in these workshops, yeah, they were also, I was always looking at them in relation to each other also. I mean, it sounds like a PhD presentation, but not. I'm gonna skip this parts very fast, just to give a little bit more context. So in the first part, these non-designers, activists, LGBTQA plus, and queer and feminist activists, they themselves participated and modified and reinvented these variable objects they considered biased and oppressive for themselves. So it's very important here. The question was not really making, I mean, these things are like, sometimes it's, you know, not even important to make or to materialize, but it was important to use them, these things, as a means of digging, you know, digging into, again, to meanings, their functionalities, aesthetics, symbolic values. And yeah, through that, we addressed a lot of, you know, material-based problems, such as, for instance, beautification, monogamy, heteronormative marriages, menstruations, obscenity, and so on. So it kind of, it created as a, like, we created a hub in a way through these artifacts by undoing and undesigning them. It was like a, yeah, material discursive exercise. And in the second workshop, the focus was on words and binary words. All the binaries, I mean, of course, the starting point is always man, woman, you know, hetero, homo, male, female, black, white, primitive, civilized, but then it's kind of, yeah, until yes and no. It goes to all kind of binary words, discourses that are materialized, and meanwhile these objects and matters are also enunciated and, you know, reproduced in the language at the same time. So we kind of made an inventory, a lot of binary things. Of course, binarism in itself is not bad per se, but we were kind of criticizing or digging in how certain binary constructions, like just I gave some examples, no, like poor, rich, or black and white, or male, female, like how they have historically a hierarchical and hierarchical relationship, and also always, yeah, this superiority inferiority relationship. So after this kind of inventory of these binaries, so we started cut them up and paste them. It was a technique that we used. So put all these binary words opposed to each other, and then rhizomatically deconstructed them letter by letter, word by word, concept by concept, through chopping them up and bringing them together. So actually we started creating totally new words, new meanings, and sometimes with other kind of associations. But yeah, we kind of try to find new ways of interpreting these binary expressions and stripping them of their actual meanings, digging their etymologies, for instance. It was also like, I mean, always discussions in these workshops are much more interesting than the outcome. So then, yeah, overcoming also the borders of translation and lingua franca, and you can also see it's not about language per se, but then how actually there's a reconfiguration of visuality and materiality there. So actually, I still give this workshop, and it's a continuing thing. Now I give these workshops in the name of liminal neologies, and it's really interesting to have many different languages. For instance, last time I did this workshop, it was very interesting. We had like Slavic languages, Germanic languages, yeah, like Latin based languages, and like many different languages. And then all of a sudden you really see some binaries doesn't even make sense in different contexts, or like it's really interesting to see. And I'm very interested in actually how this ongoing research is gonna, like, what's gonna come up, because I'm yeah, maybe eventually, I don't know, I would like to really collect these materials and maybe yet make another like glossary, or I don't know, but it's interesting to just to discuss and unfold all these meanings again, material discursive meanings. It's really interesting. So the last round was special configurations, and I brought here the question of a body in space and like segregated spaces, and particularly public bathrooms and prisons as most segregative and violent spaces for queer and gendered bodies. So in this workshop, or like, let's say, semi-structured performative interviews, I call, so we visited different environments, such as an apartment room, a bar, a subway, a sauna, a street. So we traced the real sides. We traced, I mean, we with transgender prison activists from Germany, we traced the real side of personal experiences of violence and safety for gender non-conforming bodies. And also with all this, I wanted to show how when we talk about design, there are so many different dimensions. Of course, it was a research that had to end at some point, but it was important to kind of bring, again, yeah, prepare a basis for the discipline to show all these different aspects. But of course, like, for instance, even when we talk about bathrooms and prisons, we eventually talk about, like architectural design, technologies of criminalization, social cleansing, gentrification of unwanted bodies. So it's like, yeah, it's like entire multi-layering, like the process of multi-layering of actually problems of design. So at the end of these workshops, so I kind of very briefly sketched out the strategies for deconstruction, or like deconfiguration, for design scholars and designers. So it was the idea of the workshops. So in the last part of this work, so this prisons part, so again, I was in contact, in close contact with transgender prison activists, and I kind of I delved into it further, and I wrote and researched. Like I kept working on that, also in different countries, and I really wanted to continue to research that, because it's a quite urgent phenomenon, and that's why I'm right now doing my postdoctoral research, particularly on this subject, which is called prison heterosis normative complex. The name comes from prison industrial complex. Angela Davis called it once, and how, you know, that kind of indicates how prisons right now are the biggest, one of the biggest industries in neoliberal capitalism. And yeah, but not only that, there's also other aspects like how, for instance, especially trans non-binary people and queer people, but not only, of course, like racialized people, underclass people, like all these different hierarchies, they have fatal experiences in prisons every day. And the prisons, meanwhile, like in design and architecture field, especially in new technologies, is like kind of growing. So I'm kind of looking at this problem. It's my really, I mean, I just started this year, so I will continue researching. So I will also investigate the material and technological implications of this segregation, like gender, sex, but then other hierarchical segregations in and outside prisons. So it's like in criminal justice system in general. For instance, now new artificial intelligence technologies and new surveillance technologies. So it's not about only architecture or things, objects and furnitures and stuff per se inside of the prisons, but also like the new punitive technologies, let's say. I will look at them, and also I will discuss the possibility of justice with the question of prison abolition and designers, architects' roles in neoliberal prison industry. So also, meanwhile, I continue being part of international design collective, Decolonizing Design. It's been already like, more than 5 years maybe. So in this group, Decolonizing Design, we are all from third world countries, living in the first world. And so we are looking at design from, in terms of coloniality, but from very different perspective. Like, my work comes from more this angle, and you just saw, but also like we have I don't know, like border technologies focus, or like sound studies, like new sound and voice recognition technologies, and we have reproductive technologies focus. So we have like from several angles and strands, we are trying to kind of attack design in a way, not attack, but like unfold, let's say, or like literally bother from different directions. So as you see, my academic research is relatively boring, but but has a lot to do with this haunting in terms of digging the histories, bringing this uncovered issues to today, and kind of, as I said, bother and disrupt the current repeated system of bias. Of course, it's like it's a complex area, because also happily today more and more people talk about it, and there's like growing interest and awareness, especially in young generation. But at the same time, there are other questions in terms of commodification and tiring the terms, like losing the ground. But it's an ongoing thing. Anyway, in this academic part, my main medium is text, of course. So if you're very interested in this subjects, I have a lot of text, not that as boring. So I have also very accessible texts, and you can contact me. But also I'm also trying to bring now, with this current research, I also want to bring my visual material side of my designer self, because I have this training that I know, like I have many skills, and I was like, maybe so many years I've been kind of pushing it away, but maybe I will also in this research eventually go back to it and maybe explore different kind of archiving works, like digital visual archiving right now also is a very interesting and growing area, and also exploring different forms of writing, you know, like more designerly in a way. So yeah, this part again, it's done, it's not boring. So I'm sorry, I'm going to part that is a little bit more fun, I hope, which is another life. So my performer and musician side, so in which my main medium is my voice. So this is the text part and brain part, and now is the body and the voice part. So, well, I've been always a musician, singing and composing since my very early ages. So I call myself more musician than design researcher, actually, because it was much before my design education. But I think the more critical and, let's say, political or conceptual turn occurred in the same year when I was doing my master's project in Sweden, I mentioned. So here my involvement with TIR, anarcho-queer feminist performance art collective, shaped my artistic practice dramatically, really. It was formed by incredibly talented and politicized artists, dancers, musicians, and actors. I mean, I'm saying really, it was really interdisciplinary. We had like actors, really theater formation, and we had a flamenco dancer, and then we had like classically trained musician. And so it was like in these times, like in very different formats of performance, like it was really not only experimentation for me, but also a free way of kind of digging again in the stories, like more from a more artistic way, you know, because although academia also, like academic life also kind of like opening up new experimental writings, like new kind of, you know, yeah, it's kind of getting better, but still is not as flexible in you know, when you do your artistic practice, of course. So it was for me another point of entry to research about, you know, like the stories of the women, like pathologized, especially we had a common interest in the group about pathologized, institutionalized, ostracized women, queer people who were deemed mad. I don't know, like they were put in asylums, or they committed suicide, and then there were like other facts, other stories going on about them. So we were always manipulating the already manipulating facts in this group, so which I call now counterfactual narration, and I use a lot in my music, like kind of or in my performances, like taking this already given facts and kind of manipulating, and especially in the myths, you know, like mythology or like historical figures. So we were sorry, with the group, we were, yeah, a lot invested in these issues of madness, rape, sexual violence, precarity, and yeah, we did site-specific performances using the text from this women, like not only women, like it was not gender exclusive, but yeah, for instance, Valeria Solanas, Eileen Warner's, like this, you know, serial killer, not only artist, but yeah, very interesting figure, and Franziska Woodman. So many different figures, like it was very interesting to dig in all, like, you know, textual and artistic narratives in that, and create a very multimedia, in a way, performances. So I also in this group used my sorry, very fast, use my designer skills to do posters, like other graphic works, and also we did like hands-on, how do you say, on-site interventions. Like one of the most important one, this was like, it was an intervention, kind of occupation of an abandoned school in the neighborhood, in the suburb in Stockholm, and with a young local artist, and like forming a pseudo city theater and acting with that and so on. So then yeah, I think I have 10 minutes. Okay. So yeah, especially here, it was a neighborhood that we worked a lot. I mean, there are so many works that are, that are not written or documented, but it's like kind of a tacit knowledge, working with so many different people with so many different backgrounds is really, yeah, it was really enriching process. So at the same time, of course, I did a lot of also vocal compositions in that group, which was very important. And then I had another performance collective, which is LOL Institute. And actually with these two great Mexican women artists, we also addressed the issues of appropriation, especially cultural appropriation, post-coloniality, capitalism, but always with the tools of humor, like absurdity, magical thinking. So it was also important. I think it also changed quite like quite a lot of approaches that I had before, like all the severe things, had to be severe in a way. But yeah, it also changed my approach in a way. Yeah, we can have fun, we can have joy when we're, when we're pissed, when we're angry. So it's possible. So so then I came to Portugal, and I continued performing in projects, mostly based on invitation, because I was doing my PhD at the same time. And I did also soundtracks. I still do, like playing in many stages. But as a vocalist, I more and more developed my own language of extended techniques, which as I mentioned, I always did in my entire life. But I think in this, after I came, like last 8-7 years, it's been like where I've been really developing techniques, like mastering them, and like giving workshops and so on. So these extended techniques, which is like using human voice in a way as an instrument with its full capacity. So yeah, I've been researching, meaning when I say research in my artistic practice is like really bodily. So I've been researching, for instance, in this project Manhole, it was with a Swedish actor, and in this group in TIR, we were working together also, Nina Japson. So we were researching voice as a duo, two voices. It was a like deep research, practical research process. So we were exploring and performing mouth-to-mouth kind of vocal work, and locating voice in space in each other's bodies. So, and my own, for instance, yeah, all this, it's very interesting for me, the embodiment and bodily resonance of voice, as a solo vocalist, the analog vibration of, that's what I really like using. Of course, I like also all kind of digital instruments, and like great, but for me it's very important to still being in the body. It's very mundane, it's very bodily, and it's quite different than academic work, which is super mental and super staying there, and this like being in the vocal kind of also grounding the body a lot, and it's a very it's an individual process. But in this kind of projects, now I will show also, just like almost finishing, it's also interesting because all of a sudden your voice is extended to the other person's body. And in this project particularly, we were like all of a sudden 2 people, but like sounding really 5 or 6 people at the same time. And yeah, it was very interesting process. And sorry, I think I put some videos here, but then I realized they are jumping to the site. So it's not embedded in the PDF, but you can find all of them in my site, and or like, yeah, I can show later on if you have time. So then we have right now, I'm part of this trio, vocal trio, Cobra Choral. So it's a vocal project for 3 acoustic female voices. So we are working within an organizational system. For instance, I think these are videos, but it's gonna jump. So we've been trying to build a language together for 3 voices, a vocabulary and a method for 3 voices, for composition, improvisation, and vocal techniques. So like, yeah, it's been also very like deep research in terms of vocal practice. So there's this structure of transference between us, like we call it common pulse. It's like circular pulse. So we are always in, you know, in relation to each other, and we kind of react to each other, adapt to each other's voices, mirroring each other, rapturing. So there's like so many different techniques we are trying to establishing rhythmic and imagetic kind of narrative landscapes. Then I have Noitu. It's a music duo and harp with the harpist Angelica Salvi. It's a music duo with harp and my voice. So it's more like a music project, but at the same time, when we started, it was the same kind of search, like how do we narrate, evoke the experiences of corporeal or mental metamorphosis, and how do we respond to each other's instruments? Like how can I respond, my instruments, like my voice, can respond to our harp and vice versa. So we're still playing together and exploring different sounds, and this is also yeah, it's my solo project. Sorry, I'm just checking the time. I think I'm good. Still have some minutes. Yes, yeah, as I said, I've been doing soundtracks, collaborating with other artists, doing vocal improvisations in various places. And one of them was Vox Flora, Vox Fauna, which I started putting together in 2019, and now it's an album. But yeah, it was a big detour and a kind of multi-layered set of inspirations behind this project, because for many years, as I mentioned, like this, my particular interest in women deemed mentally ill, altered states of, you know, all this, my interest in altered states of female psyche and their artistic reflections, they kind of put me in, of course, research. I've been reading a lot of literary works, biographies, autobiographies, fictions addressing this issue. And in years, I discerned a commonality. So very interestingly, at some point, in one way or another, these women were always escaping to the nature at some point. So literally from institutions, sometimes from asylums to the forest, and kind of, they always depict themselves kind of turning into the nature, or starting being a part of a tree, or like being a part of a plant or an animal, or rooting in the earth or something. So it's very interesting to think about all this, you know, relationships, or like set of links, like okay, like historically oppressed body, but like in the nature, like all this politics and poetics together. And it was really interesting for me, and I started improvising a lot with this idea, like how can we actually embody that, and like kind of being a prosthetist of a flora and fauna, but not like a kind of a romantic idea of we can go back to the nature, all fine, but like it's more like, you know, access to human psyche through this flora and fauna is like kind of embodying it. So I use a lot of course, this and it's also a form of haunting, again, like haunting this women that, you know, who doesn't exist anymore, who don't exist anymore, who are not here, but at the same time bringing their narratives and experiences, kind of embodying them in my own body. So I use, of course, this literary works as a reference point, but also I used a lot Turkic cosmology, for instance, you know, Tengrism, animism, like kind of bringing a little bit also my own instincts and past and histories into the issue. So yeah, anyway, this is still going on, and it's also, of course, it started as a just acoustic vocal voice only idea, but then I expanded it, so it became like organic, inorganic, analog, digital, a mixture of, again, also breaking the binaries. So it became a bit hybrid and very simple work. So it was a starting point. And now with the other projects, I'm kind of digging in this ideas further, like how to, yeah, like how to tell facts with other facts, like kind of how to narrate as a counterfactually in a way. So, oops, we had yeah, these are videos anyway, doesn't matter, you can see later. And yeah, I had another performance, which was Syncope vocal, and this was about, yeah, it was about also voice, like bringing the voice to this syncope reflects the kind of losing the consciousness and how to kind of explore that nausea and not being able to take in. So I made a vocal performance with that concept recently, and I used the visual of endoscopia in accompanied the vocal performance. And these are the forthcoming works. So the Vengeance of Serpents, it's about Shahmaran is a mythical figure. Actually, now I'm going back to mythical figures again, and actually it's even more, I'm stretching further this analogic and digital worlds. I'm going even back in the history, and I think I will go further a little bit with technology. So I'm kind of pushing also my own limits. So here it's just, I think it's gonna be not that it's still like quite analog. Sorry, maybe I was using the wrong word, but yeah, it's still quite grounded. But yeah, it's soon it will happen. It's about Shahmaran, queen of serpents that were located in Anatolia, and the story about her. And then in November, I think. So I'm also in the process of creating another project, also performance project. I mean, this is going to be really mixed media, performance, vocal work, and a lot of visuals. I don't know, like I'm still in progress, but this is, I'm also going a little bit more and more, not only music and vocal, but merging my own other designerly skills with my performer skills. Maybe they can merge eventually together. So this is going to be this doesn't move, okay. This is also going to be about some mythological figures, several figures and their stories around cosmism and kind of futuristic cosmos merged with historical mythologies. I hope it's all clear and fine. I think I have to stop here. So thank you. You can write me and you can check my work further in the site. So thank you.
Thank you, Ece. I won't say anything. I'll leave my comments and questions for the debate, and I'll give the floor now to Diogo.
Hey, nice one, Ece. Yeah. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be here or there, well, whatever this is. Before we dive into it, I would like to thank Sergio Rebelo, who contacted me, and all of the organizing committee of this cycle for inviting me to share some of my work. And also let me thank you for the generosity of everyone that's managed to attend today. Finally, I would like to add that I'm quite pleased with the pairing that you guys set up for today. I know Ece and I know her work from different contexts, and although we come from different theoretical backgrounds, which in some ways collide due to technical incompatibilities, I believe that there's a partially shared agenda. So we'll see that. Okay, so I have like 40 minutes, right? So I'll try to be as clear and concise as possible. And I know that there will be a Q&A or discussion at the end, but if at any time during the presentation something gets misheard, please let me know, because I tend to talk kind of fast, and I'll promise I'll try to refrain myself. But well, there's always a risk there. Okay. So my intentions, and we'll see how they go, is to divide this presentation in two parts. And actually, I was kind of premeditating on this. I tried to create as more connection points with Ece's work as possible, and I think we'll have a lot to discuss afterwards. So firstly, I'll address the overall technical aspects of the work that I've been trying to do. hopefully demonstrating that the practical frameworks in which or through which the work gets done, the prosaic technical, is inherently a multi-layered association of theoretical implications brought into being by the constrictions of form and matter. In this first part, I'll attempt to surpass local features of specific objects or projects and try to sketch out the implications embedded in the intertwinement of computation and representation, briefly addressing concepts as notation, syntax, synthesis, and modeling. Secondly, I hope to get to this part. I would like to zoom in into some of the thought experiments that I did last year that were partially shared through 2 exhibitions. The first one was Vocal Tract Black Hole Vent Shaft, part 1, that was created by Luis Fernandes for Generation. And the second one was, Air Through Soft Solids, part 2, curated by Nuno Crespo for Galeria Presença. This collection of experiments dwell within the problematics of vocal synthesis and tried to establish both vocal synthesis and manipulation as retro-bioengineering potentials directed onto the production of new body diagrams. Okay, so before we dive into the whole thing, I like to just point out that at a certain point we'll be discussing voice and synthesis, but I would like to urge you to regard such theme as a variable, as a Z, like a Z representation, if you will, as a particular association making use of the performative and therefore constitutive possibilities brought by computation. Okay, so maybe I'll start sharing the screen, right? That's how it gets done. So you guys are able to see this, right? Let me see. Yeah, a pink thing. Yeah? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so at this point, I think it's important to mention that my main and almost sole work tool, and thus my main framework of materially access to and make sense of the world through construction, is programming. Now, this may sound odd since the materializations produced by such tool are projected into specificities of other media such as video or sound or printmaking and so on and so forth. However, all of those embodiments can be technically subsumed to computational logics and syntax, which in its turn can be grouped under the category of the text, both in symbols and protocols. This doesn't amount to say that there is a total interchangeability or isomorphism between an object and an image, in this case, between a program or file and its outcome, display, or rendering. And I think I would like to start in this part and quote Joanna Drucker when she said that digital media gained their cultural authority in part because of the perception that they function on mathematical principles. The relationship between digital images and their encoded files, and in other cases between digital images and their algorithms that generate them as display, lend to the conviction that the image and the file are mutually interchangeable. This is the important part now. The argument that must be made is for an investment in reinscribing, always inscribing, form into matter. This acts situates representation in human cultural and social systems where the condition of materiality permits and or requires critical considerations of the ways material form participates in and helps replicate cultural mythologies. So, one of the things I want to do with this is that this distinction that there's no like isomorphism or interchangeability between an image and the software or the code or the script or whatever that produces it. I'm just actually making this connection from the standpoint of the producer. So the distinction will arguably hold from the standpoint of the producer through the restrictions and operative models brought into play by the tool when acting through it or upon it. From that perspective, the act of coding, as embedded in the workflow of producing a presentation, introduces a notion of causality towards the modeling of a target system that inverses the practice of simulation as it is read in its mimetic form. So, and I would like to try to bring some examples to the table of how I would regard, at least in maybe in a trivial sense, but still operative, how computation or working through code in producing images in a way or another inaugurates or brings into the table a mimetic a simulation operation that's kind of distant from the traditional mimetics that you find in artworks. So I'm showing you this image. This is from the at the end of the American Civil War, and this is the Confederate Army down in Centersville, VA. And I would like you guys to notice that these things here are supposed to be cannons. They are called, well, it's a rude name, but they are called Quaker guns. And you see, they were meant actually to simulate the surface or the surface or the rendering, the visual rendering of actual cannons. So this was used at the end of the war because they wouldn't have any more funds or equipment, but still there was a war that needed to be played out, and so this kind of simulation as decoy was set into operation to. If you're looking to a fort or a fortification and you see those at a distance, those logs, in a way or another, although they are representations or decoys, they still function in the sense that the other is going to assume them to be, due to their appearance, they're going to be actual guns there. So we have these two, they are like mimicking, as you see, this is just a sculpture, a log. And this is really cool. I love this image. This is a tactic, a warfare tactic still we use today. So this is like an inflatable version of the S-300 SAM, which is how do you call it, a war, how you call it, a military armed car. And yet, yes, the Russian army still has a separate division of engineering only dedicated to inflatables, decoys, and all of that. So it's cool to see that in terms of resolution, this decoy or this image has much more resolution than the other, because the surveillance systems that are in place right now require for more resolution, but the same principle holds. And now, regarding this tank, I would like to show this image here. So this is like a really old school game from the 90s called Tank Wars. And as you see, you also get this depiction of what is a tank or a war machine. However, what's in place here are two different modes of representation and two different models of representation. So, and I would like to quote Antoine Bousquet on making this differentiation. So, upon reflecting on the meaning of simulation, it struck me that it's possible to distinguish between two, if perhaps complementary significations. There's a first signification that refers back to an older understanding of simulation, and is a more etymologically faithful meaning of simulation in terms of deception, in terms of pretense, illusion, and false appearance, which refers us back to the classical idea of the simulacrum as formulated by Plato. Okay, so however, if we think about this is what we have in place here with our Quaker guns and the inflatable. But what happens here in the game would be something like this. There is also a more contemporary meaning of simulation. This is a conception that is tied into the history of computing, although it is predated, and which suggests the dynamic representation of processes, operations, and situations through the formal description of the internal characteristics and constituent variables of a given system. With it comes the claim to be capturing in some depth whatever is being simulated rather than simply its surface. In fact, the simulated representation might not be very similar nor replicate our immediate phenomenological perception. It might, for example, merely take the form of data points on a computer printout. Okay, so guys, what I'm trying to go through here is that when you address, if you use computation as computation, when you address representation or image making, if you will, you're actually going in a different direction. So like the painting that we have here, it's a well-known painting that depicts the history of, or the myth, the Greek myth of the production of image, or the invention of image. And that we have here is the Corinthian maid sketching out the shadow of her boyfriend that's in theory supposed to leave tomorrow for war. So what I have here is a picture on a picture, and I would like to think about the following. as an example, if we take Joseph Wright's painted this picture, the way in which Joseph Wright painted this picture, actually he addressed the shadow in itself. So in order to render or compile this image, Joseph Wright addressed the shadow in itself. If we imagine that we were to create a similar image with the same elements in CGI, probably we wouldn't address the shadow directly as well. In the same way, we would probably model the boyfriend or the soldier in this case. We would probably model a wall, and we would model a light source. And then, in terms of synthesis, the shadow would come up as a result of this modeling. So as you see, instead of going top-down, computation in terms of representation brings this different vector of going bottom-up. And as Busquet was telling us, even those kinds of representations do not need to be very similar in terms of their appearance or semblance. So I brought here, and I brought this specific example because it's a really problematic example. It's kind of a go-to example in the area of engineering epistemology and model theory, of how a model, in the sense that Busquet, or a simulation, would work in the sense that Busquet was describing in the second paragraph, of what is to try to capture a performance or inner mechanics of a behavior, and not actually regarding how it might look like. So this is a rather problematic model. It's known as Schelling's model of segregation. So I remember that Etche mentioned the notion of segregation here, and this engineering tool, is probably one of the most vicious, probably one of the most vicious arguments based in the formal language of computation to actually reimpose and reiterate the problems of segregation, and actually to veil or preclude access to to problems of racism embedded in science. So I'll try to explain really briefly what was the proposal by Schelling. So what you see here is like a cellula automata. So imagine that each square is supposed to be a living quarter, so a house or a home, if you will. So you're looking at a neighborhood. And so Schelling decided that he was going to inhabit or populate that neighborhood with a population of two types. In this case, they would be black and white. And what he did is he designed this utility function in which each one of the inhabitants will try to move or change its habitation quarters if he's not satisfied with his neighborhood. His neighborhood, in this sense, would be the 8 cells that are adjacent to the center one. So himself, he'll look to the other 8 cells surrounding him, and depending on the tolerance of that inhabitant, and you can see this in this case, the tolerance is of 3. He will move into different quarter, and they will all do the same, and they'll try to come into an equilibrium. So I have some renderings here that I did from this implementation, where you actually can see that if you have a tolerance of 3, in the beginning they are just randomly put into that seat, if you will, and they try to readjust and segregate. Okay, if you increase decrease the level of tolerance, it will take much more time to reach equilibrium. You get this almost tripartite kind of model. The main problem with this model actually was that the main argument made by Schelling, which was Secretary of Defense at a certain point, was that segregation would happen anyways. We mathematically proved it, and he forgot to include into the model, and that would be impossible to do, every type of every history predicates, all of the systems that Etche was actually describing in her presentation. They were precluded from the model. Still, the conclusion was taken from the model that segregation is just a mathematical outcome, so there's nothing we can do about it. And this just came just after Jim Crow's laws. So they were trying to make a point that Jim Crow's laws had nothing to do with the segregation being in place in the United States. Okay, so this is just an example of what a model would be in this sense. And getting back to this idea of the shadow, what we do in computation would be something like this. So a rudimentary example of explanation would be a shadow on the wall. When we try to explain the shadow on the wall by itself, like by referring to its own characteristics, we are merely describing the shadow. In order to explain the shadow, it is necessary to intervene or manipulate what casts the shadow. By manipulating the wooden pole, for example, we decide if it explains the shadow or not, and if yes, then in what way. This is what is called the manipulationist's account of explanation. X explains Y, if and only if had we intervened with X, Y would not have been produced. Intervention becomes synonymous of explanation. Okay, so this sounds like something that's really far-fetched within the field of design or even the field of art, if you see, or even aesthetics. But the argument I'm trying to make is that the way in which we present our models, and I'm using models in a looser term as thought experiments, it's quite similar and it works on the same premises and the same fictions that models work with science. So what we're seeing now is a still image from an awesome, in my opinion, an awesome video work by Peter Fischli and David Weiss from 1987 called "The Way Things Work" and "The Way Things Go." Sorry, and it's just a 30-minute video where you see a lot of objects impacting on each other and making this sequence of chain of events interconnected. And here you see and this is, I think, much more odd and fictional than the previous piece or that I just described. This is the MONIAC. So the MONIAC is the Monetary National Income Analog Computer. And this was designed by William Phillips, and is actually an analog computer, which is just a water piping system that intends to simulate or to model an economy or a macroeconomy through valves and water flow. And you see, just a small comment at this point, I would say that this seems much more fictional than, or even static, if you want, than the previous model that I showed. So this is a quick rendering of how models get analyzed, both for arts and science. The main thing here to me to focus on, and this is really close to what Etche was describing, is actually this part here. So this is based on Goodman's and Catherine Nelson's notion of zero representation and representation as. But you see that when you get a target system, that would be the real thing in the real world, and you get the model of that representation, you get the representation or a model for that target or event that you are trying to model. The thing is that the properties that you get to the target and actually the qualities that are inherent to those properties, they get imputed back to the target. So, and this brought us back to the idea of aesthetics and construction, and this idea of what is constructed is being what constructs or what we construct ourselves. And thus the whole problem that Etche was addressing in the field of design is that when you actually, I'm going back to this image, when you, sorry, oh, I lost it, sorry, yeah, I lost that one. When you actually construct something, what you're doing is, in manufacturing an X manufactures you under the guise of yourself. So this is what means to get imputations back into the target. And this is the main function of aesthetics in arts and in a sense in science as well. So, and this has to do with this mode of epistemology that it takes that he who would know the world must first manufacture it. Meaning that when we are doing some trivial task as measuring a tree, saying or the count that that specific tree has 2 meters or 2 or 3 meters has no recollection whatsoever to reality. It's just how you are imposing or actually bringing into your own world the features of that tree that make them intelligible to you. So sorry, girl. So in this tone, I would like to address this conclusion of Kathleen Elgin that stated, the arts and the sciences perform many of the same cognitive functions, both serving to advance understanding. Both scientific experiments and works of art highlight, underscore, display, or convey some of their own features. They thereby focus attention on them and make them available for examination and projection. Despite their similarities, science and art might seem to differ in their attitudes towards facts. Science is said to adhere to facts, arts to be indifferent to them. Such, I urge, is not the case. Science, like art, often scorns fact to advance understanding through fiction. Thought experiments, I contend, are scientific fictions, literary and pictorial fictions, aesthetic thought experiments. So this would be the case if we go back to Schelling's segregation model, and even with more well-known models like the Fibonacci number that I still used to map demographic progression. If you think about it, when you think about how the Fibonacci numbers work, you have to make a lot of assumptions that are not real at all. Like that rabbits will live forever, that rabbits will always reproduce at the same rates, that each rabbit will only give birth to another rabbit. But still, so we have these models in a sense to try to help us yield the world. Between science and art, they are not that different in a way or another. And to me, the working through computation, and always in this weird way of having a tradition that looks to simulation through different lenses, brought this idea that's not precluded, that's not exclusive to computation, of the performativity of the object that is in place or that you are producing. So one of the problems I also wanted to briefly address here, like when you have these characterizations of symbolic systems in arts, usually you have these three major systems, which are representational, would be pictures, the discursive, languages, and the notational. Notation in this case would be the most classical sense of music. So, and you see that the syntax for the notational in this case, music, would be differentiated, meaning that each symbol you can count, they are countable, they are finite symbols. While if you go to the picture, the syntax of a picture is considered to be dense because each symbol they're infinite in the sense that every time you try to open it up through semiotics, a new symbol will appear from the gap between the previous two. So the problem is that actually, and this is one of the most interesting things for me in computation and working computation within the artistic field, is actually that we use a differentiated syntax to produce dense semantics, and that would actually be connected to, or would entail that we would be working on literature or languages into the discursive. However, we are actually going through the representational. Okay, so yeah. So one of the things I wanted to just point out, this was briefly, I'm not sure how I'm doing on time. Nuno, may I ask how am I doing on time right now? Because I have no idea.
Oh, I forgot it to
okay.
count, but I think you're all right.
I'm cool. Okay.
I'll let you know when there's some 10 minutes left. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So my main point here, I'll stop this thing for a second. Yeah. My main point here would be that working with computation in this mode that we are talking about, and please keep in mind that you can work with computers, but working in computation as computation always entails this idea of modeling and precluding yourself and trying to get back a step and see how the system that you designs operates. Of course, this to me underlines the performativity of objects that, of course, they are not exclusive to the computational objects, but the fact is you cannot ignore the fact that they are performative when you're working with them through computation as computation. Okay, and this is has been one of my main focus or problems working in what is traditionally considered to be a scientific medium. But it was really interesting to see that this idea of model or fiction that we actually think that's not at play in scientific research or epistemology, actually it is, and it's pretty close to what we do in terms of fiction. Of course, this is not, I'm not saying at all that all scientists are giving us some sort of fairy tales. Actually, fiction is something that's necessary for you not to be ambiguous. So even as we are speaking now, we have to be kind of simplistic on what we're saying. Otherwise, we would fall into despair and the whole world would fall down, because you need some kind of to address things in a simplistic way. With in a simplistic way, you have to be careful of the scale in which you do that, in order to avoid ambiguity. But of course, that in there as well, you can also reconstruct and keep reconstructing the models and the simplicity that you feel that is more capable or modeling of actually defining or describing some kind of isomorphism with what we're trying to describe, or getting at what would be your targets or your target system. So with that in mind, I would like to actually now go to the second part. I'm not sure if I'm going too fast or not, but like Etche, I don't want to be the boring guy, and she did a cool job, so I'm not. So
by the way, Diogo, we have 20 more minutes.
Okay, it's half. Okay, awesome. So I want to so this is the main framework in which where I've been trying to operate. And there's a lot of going backs and forths, and there's a lot of problems that I have. So a lot of the authors or the schools of thought I'm coming through do not allow a series of operations, like the operations that Etche was describing, specific to the queer term. We don't have in analysis the tools to address it. So one of the things that I'm actually quite curious to see how it will unfold is how queer theory will be initiate a dialogue with analytic philosophy. It has been done with feminist philosophy, LGBTQ theory, but not the queer theory, precisely because of how the queer term is defined or not defined, and that not definition is the part of its practicality. So there's a lot of there are some problems there. So once again, just trying to make this transition and getting back to this idea of performativity, and I know that the term of performativity probably or surely has really important implications in gender studies and women's studies and social theory. But now the idea of performativity is actually what drives in a way or another, or you cannot even avoid its computation as well. So one of the, I would like to tell us just a short story. So we all know that dictum from Alan Turing, that he would consider the system to be intelligent if he would be able to fool another human that he's intelligent. And the argument that was made by John Searle to attack that argument was the paradox of the Chinese room. So you imagine that you have a room with a small crack in it. You have someone inside the room that does not speak Chinese, and you give them a lot of paper and an algorithm on how to respond, not how to learn Chinese. This is a main thing, even with machine learning, not how to learn Chinese, but how to respond to a question in Chinese. And so if a Chinese speaking person would fold the question inside the room, probably, let's forget how long it would take, an answer would come out. The thing is, probably a Chinese speaking person would think that there was a Chinese speaking person inside the room as well. And John Searle's argument is that he doesn't know Chinese, of course, but the fact is that, and to me, one of the main or one of the most important aspects or notions coming out from computation is this idea of functionalism. That has nothing to do with functionalist architecture whatsoever. So functionalism would be that you define something not by what it is, but by what it does. Okay, so the thing is not, you're not pinpointing something to a category, you're actually trying to observe how the thing is behaving or wants to behave or perform, and that thing and how it behaves will dictate how it will be, should be addressed in a specific context. So this brings into account a lot of, so this brings Hegel back into the mix in the sense of what is intelligibility. So the fact that I'm not intelligent or you're not intelligent, the fact is intelligibility is the characteristic of what is intelligible within this multi-layered syntax system or semantic system. So once again, if you think about it, even the fact of intelligence, and we can switch intelligent for some other categories here, is just more a matter of how it's functionally operating and how it is constructed socially. Of course, you have a lot of problems here, and I would say that this thing here would be like the geek version of Judith Butler's gender trouble, in the sense that while you're performing it and precluding the reasons why something is being performed, doesn't mean that it's real or not real. That's not even the point. The being is as relevant as the being, as the being is how something gets operated or instantiated within the intelligibility of the community. So with that in mind, that's how I got into voice. And so voice would be like a kind of, those are, I think the curators call them artworks, but I did a lot of like thought experiments on how voice would work under these assumptions. So I'll need to get back to the sharing thing. Sorry guys, it's just, I hate talking to the PDF by myself. I feel lonely. Okay, so where was I? Yeah. Okay, so this would be the thing. So I'm addressing, I'm not even talking much about what each exhibition had. That's not even the point. So these were these two exhibitions. Actually, there was a third, but I forgot to put it here. Doesn't matter. And so this specific project that's still ongoing, and actually, if everything goes smoothly, we'll have its conclusion. Not because I reached the conclusion, but because I'm tired of it. In the beginning of next year. So the sole purpose of this project is kind of, or this definition would be an ongoing long-term research on synthetic voice, body, and modeling, which intends to locate computational vocal manipulations as synthesis as retro-bioengineering tactics responsible for generating new body diagrams. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you guys was how I came to this idea of vocal synthesis. So as Katrina, as Etche knows, I've worked a lot with Jonathan Will Saldanha and Katrina Miranda, and voice has been always a really present thing. In this sense, I'm interested in voice, not by what it is, but the whole that it leaves behind when it is removed. So when I try to think about the voice, it's not in this abstracting gesture of removing form and matter, of just severing them, is if I remove voice from the body, and I do believe that, and I totally against any idea of a disembodied voice, and I know that Catherine Hales is one of the main precursors of this idea, but I really hate it. So if you remove a voice, one of the things that I wanted to understand is how the body will react to that. So this idea of abstraction, and when I use the term abstraction, I'm not following the tradition of aesthetics, I'm following actually the tradition of mathematics and physics. When I have this idea of abstraction, it's not just relevant what you took off, it's relevant how the thing where you took it out from responded to that removal. And this will be the first part. The second part is if you change the thing that you removed and you put it back in, how would the system would respond to that? So I came into this idea actually listening to some reggaeton and Arca and all of that. So to me, at a certain point when I was going through all of this stuff and I was listening to Arca, I think it was Arca or Tomás del Real, that's not relevant right now, but it's relevant, the specific positionality in their identity in this sense. but we'll talk about that later. It was interesting to see that autotune and vocal synthesis were being used in a way that was not the technical or trivial sense that we're trying to correct off-tune kind of off-tune or inaccuracies in their singing. Actually, what I felt at some certain point is if from my previous experience, what I know about voice actually brings together two things. This is one of the fascinating things about voice. It brings together the sense of depth or cognition brought into the articulation of words or sounds. Words are not necessary, but actually it entails also a body architecture that is manifested through the resonance of that voice. So voice is this shared space or problematic space where, if you will, it's a really Spinozian thing, because what you get in voice is a translation or a rendition of body and mind, if you want to have that kind of dualism embedded in the same object. So, yeah, before I get into that, maybe if I have time, I'll address this with more detail at the end, this idea of autotune. But maybe one of the things I want like to share to you guys, with you guys, is something that really helped me to proceed to go ahead with this project. That was the work of Luciana Parisi in abstract sex, because then I needed to have a body or a conception of body that would be able to take in this kind of mutations. So what I think I want to read right now, just briefly, is these two paragraphs. So the trivial function of an autotune module is to perform pitch shifts on an incoming audio signal, correcting off key inaccuracies and conforming it into cultural canons. Among the pervasive or adjustable parameters offered by these signal processing units, there is one that stands out as part of an abstracting program of retrobioengineering potentials. The presence of a changeable rotating dial labeled throat within interfaces populated by buttons, faders, and knobs standing for quantifiable sonic features brings forwards a material feedback that extends all available signal processing functions back into body. Although some autotune models are equipped with rather quixotic parameters like humanize, so if you have a parameter like humanize, I would like to know which function and which scale. So there is a precise local lexicality of organs posited in a throat parameter, one that celebrates a materiality, abstraction, co-causality. Adjusting a functional throat parameter reframes the instrument's auto prefix from automatic, as in automatic tuning, to self-tuning. As autotune modules are commonly reserved to the sonic processing of voice, autotuning stands as a technical prospect of self-tuning, remodeling one's vocal organs, of hearing oneself through a divergent acoustical bioarchitecture, in sense of alterity. Consequently, the perimeter of a dial that changes the length of a throat maps out an evolutionary evolutionary process in which larynx and vocal cords lower their position relative to the cranium, extending the range of vowels produced by humans and acquiring the possibility to mimic larger body sizes, a trait exploitable in sexual selection and territorial disputes. Thus, being able to fiddle with such parameter to play grants a diachronic access to past and future actualizations of voice and body, being that such navigation capacity is, despite the dial's positioning, an actualization itself. Tweaking such feature or any other made available through vocal filtering and or synthesis technologies entails a versioning of body sustained by the intertwinement. And this is, to me, the relevant part, guys. This was my main problem in even writing this thing. Intertwinement of biofunctions rendered intelligible through simulation, meaning a comprehension of matter, biology, embedded in scientific model, and social-cultural discursive vectors, a comprehension of science sonic potentials in the co-production of a body diagram. I use diagram in the sense of Foucault and Deleuze as a place of mutation through the plasticity of material science. So just to close it up, to read the endeavors of voice filtering and vocal synthesis technologies, the two shall remain conflicted for now. as actual co-producers of body, body must be constituted as an intensive, extensive, dynamic matter whose mobility is neither precluded by biologism, given essence, nor by the severance of material causes and effects by social cultural discourses. The transcendent power. Transcendent power would be the notion of ideas, the historical notion of God, or even the notion of discourse as being the sole protocol of being able to modulate body as such. In that, technological instantiations of voice bring forward and balanced collisions platforms for abstract material tactics as bidirectional vessels of extracted incepted models and incepted extracted discourses. Much like echoing and glossolalia, which can be both read as ontological plays requiring self-movement from the emitter in order to engage with what is being brought into being, the emergence of the emitter as a contextual, unique player, vocal technologies diversify possibilities, space, and intensify acts in which the forces of the material system commandeer the act of thoughts as if they have been forces of thoughts all along. So guys, with all of this jibber jabber, what I tried to do actually, and this is also a small quote from Cavarero, Adriana Cavarero, that has this beautiful idea of thinking with the lungs. And I'm sure how much time I do have now, because Noor, may I ask again, may I be a pain in the ass and ask you again?
So more or less 5 minutes now.
Okay, so maybe there's a really interesting detail on how voice synthesis, the pre-computational voice synthesis is deeply related with the idea of automaton or the automata, and how actually the voice synthesis is still one of the main problems in computation, precisely because it addresses not only the physical architecture of the body, but also seems to seems to convey a sense of depth that would be grounded into the individual within the community. So I just going maybe forward with some of the work that I did. This was a video, because I want to show you specifically two of them. So this was a video projection. This was, that is back there. I did these records using kind of synthetic skin that should be around here. Sorry, I don't have it. I forgot it. Okay. And these robots mounted on record players were actually exploring the skin and modulating the voice that was recorded in the Doppler effect. So the sense of exploring as a way of constructing, and if you go back again, this idea of trying to explanate by manipulation, by intervention, was at play here. This is what was a model also of a throat. So yeah, I had a voice. I had a recording of throat singing, and I manipulated it in order to get some of these unworldly throat models, vocal tract models. And then I rebuilt these throats with this kind of geology, because that would be the throat responsible for the voice that was generated computationally. And maybe, yeah, I would like to show you guys this series. So what I did, I worked a lot with pornography and erotica. Okay, and I had, it was a really interesting incursion, to be honest. One of the things that I did here actually was I conflated with an algorithm a lot of bodies, but what I did is actually I recorded, or I isolated the voice from those specific frames and injected the signal of the voice back into the bodies. So what you have here are those bodies being inflated by their own breathing. And of course, breathing brings, once again, breathing is pretty much intertwined with voice in the sense of commonality, and how what I bring out and get back in is much more of a material transition than a purely intellectual one. Okay, and this was the series. And now, just to close, these are some frames from a video. And this video had two versions. And to me, what was interesting at this point was what protocol was, or what model was set up to make this video, which is kind of similar to the previous images. So if I'm not sure if it's clear, but what I was trying to do is, okay, I'm not going to take voice as an output of body and intelligence. I'm going to locate voice as the primordial space of articulation of body and intelligence as such. So what I did here, I have these frames, and I'm just going to scroll really quickly because I'm sure we have some geeks in the audience, and I wouldn't like to disappoint them. Okay, so what I did first was I had this huge collection of HD, high resolution pornographic films, and erotica films. And I did this thing, which is granular synthesis. I made this composition, not looking to the images, but to the sounds. And I used granular composition, granular synthesis, because granular synthesis has the ability of going back and forth, of having a lot of grains reading sounds. So at a specific point, you can actually have two voices of two different bodies, two different scenes, two different places being articulated together. And the output was this thing. Okay. So what I did afterwards was this. I'm just going to show you a frame of it. I did an F50 analysis of the sounds, separated the whole sound through bands, and then I got the behavior of each frequency band, and I mapped that back into a matrix, a tessellated matrix, to get this thing that you guys will see here. So this was the result. Okay. This is all voice. Then I had the data, I had the model, I have my model as my fiction that what I wanted to implement. And what I did is I went back to the original videos and used that blurry image as a time map. So what happens here, let me see if I can remove the sound, is this. Sorry, whoop. What happens is this. Every time you have this one of these images, a white pixel will refer to the actual time frame or the actual frame being played at the moment. A black pixel will go forwards 5 frames. So in one single image frame of my video, you'll have this kind of time displacements that will modulate the bodies according to their movements, positions. So you have these weird bodily constructions that are actually bending together or melting together the bodies that were in that scene according to their behavior and what they did. Once again, not what they are, but what they did. And also they will be able to cross from their own scene to actors or performers in the other scene. So, and this was the output. Yeah, and I think I'm out of time. No.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
It's
So
about
yeah.
time. So if
Thank you very much.
Conclude.
Yes. I had a lot of fun. That's my conclusion. Showing you guys this. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for your 2 presentations. As we predicted, there was so much things in common. I don't have a specific question. Well, I have a question that is it's a bit big to be answered like in just like the 25 20, more or less 20 minutes that we have for the Q&A questions. Let me just check if we have if we have any question from the audience. Not yet. But what I would like to propose is like I'll try to make some kind of analysis from both of the lectures and trying to merge into a single thing. And so first, I would like to react to Etche's talk, and then to Diogo's, and then I'll try to bring this what I found the things in common between the two of you. For me, it was very interesting this session because probably the first three ones were focused more like on showing designers' portfolios, so it was very visual, and it was very like people like undergraduate students and master students could react easily to that. And also, but I think this one was more obviously you show samples of your work, but for me, but that's my understanding and my analysis. Your work is like a materiality, but I don't want to say materiality as a material, you know, like of a way of thinking. So so what in trying to make it more accessible, what I want to say is that. So design schools, my tendency to see design schools, and I've been teaching for 14 years now, is that many design degrees, well, many people that are studying design, they think themselves as that they will be eventually in the future like a service provider, more like a technician, a problem solver, a commercial problem solver. And they don't see themselves as so they see themselves as design being a neutral, you know, it's like that there's a problem, designers design that the solution, get some money back, jump into another project. So and I think this understanding of design as a service provider subject is being reinforced by the fact that universities are behaving more and more like corporations. I've heard and referring like people working in university referring to students as clients. So and I think me, and I'm criticizing also the environment where I work with, WIN. I'm not talking specifically about the University of Coimbra that I'm working, but any university, is that design is being taught as this very neutral, innocuous profession, and this is being reinforced by this sense of neutrality, of this apparent absence of politics from design. One example that I also like, I bring these topics into some of my classes, and I for instance, when I was giving a clear example, if we pick up a book of history of design, mostly is a celebration of people, and these people is the vast majority of them, if not all, are white, straight male from the Western countries. So the notion that we have from design is very ethnocentric, very ethnocentric, Eurocentric, very male, very heterosexual, very patriarchal, heteronormative, and racism as well. So so I'm happy that you brought the term coloniality, Etche, and also that that I know your work with the collective decolonizing design. Also, you brought the concept of intersectionality. So we can't think about racism or patriarchy or heteronormative without thinking, you know, all these concepts together. And so I don't know, there isn't a clear question, but I was thinking how to how to develop mechanisms for like future designers, like in this case design students, to be more aware of this invisibility of these absences that are within design. You know what I mean? And also now about Diogo, like those first images, they were very suggestive, you know, like the opposite of camouflage. That's this simulation, and that I found it very interesting. I didn't know those, and then you talk about, you specifically mentioned racism embedded in science. And I would like to bring up this notion that what we perceive as science, as factual and rigorous, is a notion that it comes from the 19th century, where we're building up science to prove what we wanted to prove. So science with some quotation marks, because like science was developed to prove an idea of everything that I was saying, like racism, patriarchism, heteronormative, etc. So this manipulation of the explanation, as you refer, and also like the science that, like there was a part that you quote someone saying that science is said to adhere to facts.
Yes,
and I would put
I
would put quotation marks in facts, because we manipulated those facts to prove our point. And then you link with the second part of that quote, said that art was indifferent to the facts, and I would like to establish like a link with Etche's work, which is like both of you have this, that's my understanding, you have this use design as a way to question these structures, you know, and also that you how do you say, so art is about speculation, to raise questions and to question this constructed reality. And I found interesting that you brought up, Diogo, that this brought up this notion of the disembodiment, and you're talking about the voice, and it has so much like work around the voice. So and then you ended with that quote by Cavarero, and I like her understanding of. I think was her that she said that we cannot separate who is speaking from the very act of speaking. So that's the voice as a medium, which is like, for example, when someone speaks, it shows the vulnerability. For instance, like many people are like students. Are afraid of posting, for instance, questions, because they will think they will show this idea of being ignorant, which is not like questions is like is a sign of intelligence. But it's also through voice that we show resistance to these structures of power. So this is just not, as I said, it's not a question, it's like some kind of a mashup of ideas that I tried to merge from both of you. I saw very like touching points between the two. I don't know if you want to react to this, if you want to build up probably this notion of design seeing itself as neutral, which is just replicates notions of a structure of power that, as I said, is predominantly based on racism, patriarchy, and heteronormativity. I don't know if you want to develop on this idea.
Actually, go for it. No,
you go for it, and I will follow up you.
Okay, sure. So I would say that, first of all, I never worked as a designer, so I have utmost respect for the field, and I feel historically we have been separated into different categories, and I'm not sure why. Still,
also this categorization is still a manifestation of that.
It's the same thing, yeah.
That idea of structured knowledge. So we need to also defy these notions of barriers and frontiers. I don't know who said that, something about borders. I don't know if it was Etche or Diogo, this notion of borders. And I
think it was
well,
Etche.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Etche.
Okay. We need to question those borders as well. Who designs those borders?
Okay. So I would say that I'm not really in that, for some obvious reasons, and well, two. For even my own positionality, and since I'm not really well versed on the theme as Etche is, I would say, as my point, safeguarding those 2 points, that the problem that you have in design or art or any other field of human operation, it's already guided through its own, like, how should I call them, inconsistencies or incapabilities or shortcomings. Okay, so to me the problem would be, and it's like one of the main problems. I think Etche mentioned briefly how the problems of machine learning right now, or AI, regarding class, race, and all of that. So I would say, and this is the difficult part. So a lot of propositions have been made in that specific, and I'm using this as an example. A lot of propositions have been made if that's the issue that needs to be addressed in machine learning, AI, regarding those issues, should be focused on the databases, on what is represented. Well, I would say that if that was the problem, that could be an easily fixed problem. If you created a database, then you fix the problem. The problem is not the database. The problem is that, first, you have a database. What does it mean to have a database, an archive, a category, orthogonality, all of that? And after that, the problem that you have is that it doesn't matter what you're feeding into a network, into a system, you still have Descartes and Leibniz within. So that's one of the points. So, like, one of the things that I spend a lot of time with my students working on is, and designers do it as well, we tend to use this coordinate system, the Cartesian referential. So we have these two values coordinates. And we think it as a way in which to map the world. It is what it is. And it's, in theory, it comes from a universal standing point. And it does come from universal standing points, since the people that got it into place thought that they were the universal module, okay? So what you have there, and if you see, this is a really simple thing, all of them use it. And sometimes this is innocuous, sometimes it is. But there's already a discourse embedded in that. So the Cartesian system was designed by Descartes. So of course you also have idea of humanism and normalization of space through equal densities embedded in your mapping system. So if you, and this is quite curious, if you change from a polar coordinate system to from a Cartesian coordinate system to a polar coordinate system, which is actually what is, which would be, to us, and what I mean us is the prosaic West, which would be like Europe and the United States. This would be the go-to localization, or yes, referential system. If you go to the Middle East, or specifically to Muslim countries, the polar coordinates would be in place, and the polar coordinates are in place due to their necessities regarding the theological needs. And so the thing is, the system, which also uses two coordinates but through different predicates, has a new model and a new way of modeling and mapping the world, that entails a problematic of already center and periphery there, that you don't have it embedded in Cartesian system. So this would be the example.
Even the term Middle East.
Yeah, it's the middle. Yeah, that's the thing. So
it was designed from a Western perspective.
Yes, it is. Now the thing is, and to me, my big problem is this one. I am a huge fan of structure, huge. And I do feel, and this is where I sometimes get at odds with, I would say, roughly speaking, with queer theory. I understand the potentialities. Let's imagine, like Warren Knight describes, or even Deborah Hauptmann, the potentialities in noise as being the potential of everything being embedded in a specific space. The thing is, if it's not, once again, if it's not able to be extracted, and I know that extractivism is a problematic issue, but if it's not extracted, then it's not brought into the intelligible in the sense of the community, so it's not operational in any way. So having the potential just embedded and not operational in any way, that would be a problem. So it's not a matter, I think, of destroying the systems. It's a matter of rebuilding, or even start to think about how a structure is not, and we have this problem in language, a structure is not in any way a fixed, static thing. A structure, if is a structure, is something that it's moving, supposed to move. And the cool thing about a structure, that if it moves and it is a structure, then people can follow along what you wanted to do. And you're actually starting to negotiate with others. And you have to do that. Doesn't matter. You're starting to negotiate with others how that structure might be, and it can be replicated or manipulated in that sense. So yeah. So I'm not sure if I even remember the question that you posted. So I'm not against the categories as it is. Yeah. I'm totally fine with categories as long as they're changing every day.
There was no question. I was just like trying. I did some kind of an analysis in a nutshell of things that I found interesting and pertinent in your talks. I just thank you. That was very nice comments. Eche, if you like to react.
No, Diogo made me like, because also of course computing, I think for us also is a little bit different world, no? Like, but it's super interesting. I think we pose very similar questions. Of course, I made today this kind of presentation because I thought, I don't know, students would be, because Nuno, you saw my work before. I mean, I can go deep in really like this kind of, more theoretical or even like maybe philosophical part of the issue. But no, I'm just thinking, I don't know, I don't know what to say, but I was thinking what Diogo just said about structures. No, I think this is the whole point. I mean, structures or categories or binaries, whatever, it's like, I mean, it's not that, because also the question of agency, I was thinking all these things about performativity, the essence, if there's an essence of things. So of course, it's not about the things or, the database even, there's no bad or good thing in essence. So I think it's about exactly how we consider them as unstatic and changeable, like ever changing or ever changeable entities. That's why for me, many computational works, I think, or like in this artificial intelligence, and it's really like bothering, like how actually all systems are repeating itself, in different ways. I mean, it's just like it changed the shape, but the core or what, I mean, that's why it was very interesting what you were showing, like representation, syntax, because we learn it in semiotics, no, like how you read objects, things like more like physical things. And now of course it's transposed in the computational world. But so the questions, actually the meaning, it's mostly it's the same, or they're the same problem. So I don't know, like I had many points. I don't know if you
I don't know.
And also, no, I want to say something also, because I mean, when I was starting, and that's why I imagined that there might be design students. That's why I kind of entered from the design field. But I think it's also, I mean, I lost a bit that enthusiasm about the fields. I mean, right now it's like, I decided not to be part of a field, because it's like, it's so much in this academic world right now that you enter in the loop, in the fields, and you become the enemy of the field, then, actually, like pointing out the actual problems. That's why when I decided to continue my research, I was like, no, I want to go to somewhere that is like not defined. So it was cultural studies. It's great because you can do like, because even it wouldn't be even art, you know, like artistic practice or something, because yeah, I mean, I think we're so trapped in this, again, the structures, because it's like, okay, structures are okay, but then why cannot just like cross the boundaries? I mean, when you were talking about this borders, and I'm thinking now, all these Chicana writers like Gloria Anzaldúa, she talks a lot about this border thinking, and it's very powerful, and kind of like many metaphors, like how do we think from the bridge or from the border, like what does it mean? And it's really not symbolic, because of course there are many theories also in queer theories, they are like mostly, you know, it becomes a metaphor, you know, all these terms, and it becomes a theoretical exercise, which is great, but then we have to go through, you know, we have to move on. And yeah, I don't know, it's interesting to see also Diogo's work, which finally I kind of understood, because I was always curious about no, because I think we never got to actually talk about it, but it's interesting also, like also with this new theories on, you know, post-humanism and especially transgender theory, because also we are passing from queer theory to trans theory. I mean, it's not actually, it's not direct a new paradigm, but it's kind of opening up. So it's more about, because queer was still a bit reaction, unstability, but trans is really like transiting. It's like being in a, I mean, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be, like you don't have to self-identify transgender. It's not that, but it opens other kind of thinking. So, and there are so many studies, and especially in arts, in architecture, like also, for instance, there are studies taking this surgical transgender, like gender surgeries, and they're translating into architectural computational systems. So what kind of architectures can be produced from this bodily surgeries, and it's that kind of transition. I mean, it's really interesting. I think we more and more also, we're understanding the body like differently, and also, yeah, it's this yeah, we're not anymore this, you know, like holistic, and I think this is this idea is being more and more deconstructed, no, like one single body, like having the agency, and then it's like, you know, the consciousness, intelligence, and all. So it's like all, and of course this is what Diogo is doing, and it's part of it, and it's really exciting. I mean, although I'm still the voice, at least I'm still in the physical part, but yeah, it's very, I think it opens a lot of different, it questions. I mean, it's really, it's not about so what, you know, what's in the end, because people are so, you know, we are very used to see the outcomes. Yeah. And I think these in-process things are yeah, this is what we're trying to, I think, what is meaningful at the moment. Anyway, I'm also thinking and
yes,
remembering things at the same time. But
so I was not expecting like a definitive answer to a no question, like a question that was not a question. So this was more like the reaction I was expecting from you. So there's no questions from the audience, but so I would like to, like, you I just wanted to pick something that Eche just said, like because like, oh, I finally understand your work, Diogo. So is there any
thank you, Eche.
Is there any question that you would like to pose to each other?
I wanted, actually. I mean, there were some responses, but then, yeah, I don't think that it makes sense, because, yeah, you were referring to performativity, fictions and all, and I wanted to just like a bit enter, but no, maybe it doesn't make.
Go for it.
No, but I don't remember them because there are many. But no, I wanted to ask again because I didn't catch. So the last example that you were showing.
Okay.
Technically, how, like, I didn't understand it because I was like focused on other things and visuals. I think you were talking. So you extracted you took the sounds from the videos, and then what was the process again? Just like
okay, so the first part was actually, and this was the first difficult parts, I needed to have a lot of bodies making sounds, and I thought that since I don't have access to a lot of bodies to make sound, pornography and erotica.
You should just ask sometimes.
Sometimes. But what happened is I downloaded, and this was regarding technicalities and the social implications was, I was trying to, I actually asked the museum to buy a lot of pornographic and erotica movies, a lot of them. One of the problems that I had, and this was interesting, was this, and once again, this is not my field, it's just a mental note that I took, was I needed to have high resolution movies with 60 frames per second. So we have a lot of resolution in terms of space and in terms of time. And I started going through websites, I would sell those. And from the beginning, and this was, from the beginning, I want to make this operation having the most variable palettes of skins, personal options. So I have a lot there. Whatever is possible, I have a lot. My main goal was to avoid skin and try to have white backgrounds because that would work better visually. And it was quite easy to get heterosexual pornographic films with white actors. And I had a really, really hard time finding Black actresses or trans actors in that regime of high definition. So if I went to these really low-fi, low-resolution movies, I would get everything that I would want. But in the high-end resolution, like if you go to a website and you look for, like, you have this 40, 60, 70 models, you would get like 1 or 2 brown bodies. And I was trying to look up how the hell I cannot find. So it was interesting because it seems that the kind of high resolution thing that I was going for, it's considered to be the girlfriend experience in porn. So you get where I'm going with this. So there were no black bodies, brown bodies, or transgender bodies within that type of technical resolution, temporal. Yeah. So, but then I took all of them and I started to hearing all of the voices. And what I did was I started ordering them through what I seemed to be a continuous flux. And then I chopped it all up, made this composition, but afterwards this thing went into a granulator. A granulator is something that's it's a mode of synthesis where you have, instead of having like you're adding a sine wave or removing a sine wave, you have a sample and you have these little grains that are going through the sound, traveling through the sound, and you can have like 2,000 of them. Each one will last for like 2 milliseconds. So at the same time, you can have a grain that will go, in this case, for the scene 32 with 2 guys, and the scene 1 that has a girl and a girl, or a guy and a girl, doesn't matter. And they will be sequenced into time using this non-linear way of sequencing. So, and this was the main thing. When I got
okay.
Yeah, so I really wanted to have the technical implementation of granular synthesis. And then what I did was, I did this analysis, what you call FFT analysis, and you get all the frequencies. And then I get all the bands, I have the behaviors. And then what I did was, I have this resolution, I know that I want to have a square. I mapped out those values into a tessellation of space. So they were vibrating with...
Okay. So you visualize them, visualize the sound later.
Yeah, the sound was visualized. Yeah, and then those visuals were used as deformers for the body. But this one's yeah.
So this was the very good. So
Nice.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
First, I didn't understand you use the granular synthesizer because I thought you just overlapped them and changed the frequency. So I was like, no, it doesn't sound so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
This is what we wanted, because the word conversas in Portuguese has a double meaning. It's like a talk as palestra, but also talk as conversas, and we like to use the word conversas because like we can dialogue within each other. Sure. But unfortunately, we have to finish now. We are half an hour beyond the time limit, so I think it's so you both are from live in the same town, so maybe you can like follow up this conversation later on.
I'll have questions for Etche because she needs to help me because I'm total zero in queer theory, and I keep going. So
Okay.
Etche, we'll do it soon, okay?
Coffee.
It's awesome.
So this is the last session, the fourth and the last session of Ciclo de Conversas Design and Multimedia. We'll have more next year. I would like to thank everyone in the organizing committee, and I have a list not to forget every single person. Ana Boavida, João Conceiro Castro, João Miguel Cunha, Mariana Seyssen, myself, Pedro Martins, Sérgio Rebelo and Tiago Martins. So all us 8 were the ones organizing, but obviously this is like in the context of the design and multimedia there, and a degree and master degree courses at the University of Coimbra. Etche, Diogo, thank you once again for accepting our invitation. That was a really nice conversation. I would keep going like for extra 2 hours, but we can do it probably over a beer in Porto, like an outside terrace. And thank you for watching from home, and keep in touch. Next year there will be more conversations. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.